The stench of scorched earth and ionized plasma still lingered in the air as Kale Virex stepped over the husk of a downed Vornax tank, its hull warped like melted bone. The sunset turned the sky a deep vermilion, casting blood-red light over the battlefield. Corpses, some human, some alien, littered the craters and broken walls of what had once been a Thalkiri outpost. The fighting had ended hours ago, but Kale's adrenaline hadn't faded. Not entirely. His pulse still roared in his ears, half from exertion, half from the voice of General Rakmar barking orders through the comm. No prisoners, the reptilian commander had growled. The Thalkiri are not to be pitied. They are to be erased. Kale crouched behind a shattered pylon, gripping his rifle with calloused hands. His black Solari tank top clung to his sweat-drenched skin, beneath the flak vest, his muscles burning with every motion. Years of war had made him numb to orders like that. But today something felt different. Movement flickered on the ridge above a shape limping. Not a Vornax, too slender. Not human, either. He raised his rifle finger, brushing the trigger, then froze. Emerald skin caught the fading light. Crimson hair spilled over dented black armor tangled with blood and ash. Her posture was upright despite the wound that forced one leg to drag uselessly behind her. She was pressing her back against the corpse of a fallen Thalkiri warrior, using it as a brace. Naira Talon. He didn't know her name yet, but he would never forget that face. Defiant. Alert. Eyes like twin amber blades locked on the soldiers encircling her with rifles drawn. And she didn't flinch. Kale watched as one of the Vornax raised a plasma rifle. The last one, the soldier snarled. An elite. General Rakmar approached, his scaled hide glinting in the low sun. He clicked his mandibles with anticipation. A third blade of House Talon, he said. Even better, her death will ripple through their ranks like a shockwave. Kale stepped forward. She fought with honor, he said before he could stop himself. I saw her take down 3 of yours. She never struck a downed foe. She only engaged those who attacked her. That's not the act of a savage. Rakmar's yellow eyes narrowed. Honor, he hissed. You speak of honor while standing over the bones of our dead. Kale held firm. I'm invoking Article 17 of the Solari Conquered. Prisoners who demonstrate valor are to be taken for questioning, not executed. Silence fell like a thunderclap. Even Naira blinked, the only sign of surprise. You dare cite human laws on my battlefield? Rakmar's voice dropped to a low growl. Our battlefield, Kale corrected. And yes, I do. The Vornax soldiers tightened their grips on their weapons. Rakmar's inner eyelids flicked. Fire. Kale's instincts screamed. He pivoted his rifle, barking in 3 clean bursts. The nearest Vornax dropped. His training took over his movements automatic. 1 breath, 3 deaths. By the time the rest reacted, it was too late. 15 seconds later, Kale stood alone in a new silence. The corpses of his former allies cooling at his feet. Rakmar lay face down, a smoking hole through his skull. He turned to Naira. Her expression was unreadable. You just killed your command, she said, her voice low, melodic, edged in disbelief. For me, Kale exhaled. Because they were wrong. And I'm tired of being on the wrong side of right. She stared at him. Her gaze pierced through him in a way no weapon ever had. Then slowly her lips curled into something between a smirk and a salute. Then you're now a traitor, Kale Virex. What are you going to do about it? He looked down at his wrist comm, already pulsing with emergency transmissions. Reinforcements were coming. The Solari Conquered would brand him a deserter, if not worse. Execution was likely. I don't know, he said. I do, Nira replied, hauling herself upright despite the pain in her leg. Come with me. Where? She gestured toward the distant cliffs. To my people. Where you won't be hunted. Where what you did today will be honored, not condemned. He hesitated. Everything in his bones screamed that this was madness. That the Thalkiri were the enemy. That this was suicide. But the bodies around him whispered another truth, that honor, loyalty, even justice, those things had been twisted beyond recognition. What's your name, he asked. Naira Talon, 3rd Blade of House Talon. Kale Virex, Major Solari Special Forces. He smiled bitterly. Former Major, I guess. Her smile returned sharper this time. Well, former Major, let's move before your friends collect your head. They moved together, Naira leaning against him as he supported her across the battlefield. She was light but warm, her physiology radiating heat through her armor. The scent of her was strange cinnamon and ozone, like something ancient caught in a lightning storm. Kale couldn't tell if the tingling at the back of his neck was fear adrenaline or something else. As they approached the edge of the cliffs, a sleek Vornax shuttle sat parked and unattended, likely left behind by Rakmar's personal guard. "Can you fly that?" she asked. Kale's smile turned feral. "I can fly anything with a stick and a heartbeat." With one arm around her waist and the other already reaching for the hatch override, Kale Virex knew two things for certain. He had just ended his career and started something far more dangerous. The shuttle's engines screamed against the vacuum as Kale Virex pushed the unfamiliar Vornax controls beyond safety limits. Everything inside the vessel hummed with volatile energy. Sparks danced across exposed wiring near the nav console, and the hull groaned as if protesting the absurd speeds. He gritted his teeth, scanning the tactical display. The 3 interceptor signatures had locked on. Pursuit was already underway. Beside him, Naira Talon sat rigid, her injured leg extended and blood soaking the dark plating of her armor. Despite the pain radiating through her frame, her presence remained composed, calculating. Her eyes flicked rapidly across systems data, calibrating navigation manually, while the ship's AI stuttered from residual battle damage. She showed no fear, only focus. Kale pivoted the ship sharply into the thinning upper atmosphere, using the broken terrain below to mask their heat signature. The G-forces pinned them back in their seats. Behind the interceptors chased like wolves through sky shear. Every move he made dragged the shuttle closer to structural failure, but slowing meant death. The Veil Nebula loomed ahead, its storms of colored gas twisting in the void. Kael angled toward it without hesitation. The radiation storms there scrambled sensors perfect cover, but navigating it meant death if miscalculated. That wasn't a deterrent. It was their only chance. He flew low into a debris-filled wreckage from a long-dead orbital battle. Gargantuan skeletons of forgotten cruisers drifted in silence, each rotation whispering old violence. The shuttle wove through metal ribs and shattered superstructures, slipping past where fire and decay had already left their marks. An interceptor followed too closely. Its pilot misjudged a spiral drift and collided with a spiraling weapons core. The explosion was brief, brilliant, and final. Kale's expression remained unchanged. It wasn't celebration, it was subtraction. The remaining 2 interceptors split formation, trying to flank him. He dropped altitude diving beneath the decaying keel of a Terran dreadnought. The inertial dampeners struggled. Red lights flared on the console. The structural integrity meter dipped dangerously low. Behind him, the locking tone of enemy weapons began to wail. He didn't slow. He cut the main engines, switching to cold thrusters. The shuttle coasted into a hollow section of twisted metal and silence, disappearing into a corpse of a once great ship. The enemy scanners passed without pausing. The shuttle was invisible now. With energy levels low, Kale began rigging the decoy, a frequency-mimicking beacon. Working in tandem, he and Naira rewired components torn from the backup life support bay. They moved with synchronized efficiency. Their fingers met more than once. Her touch was warmer than expected, and her hands moved with confidence honed by years of war. The beacon was deployed into the void, and soon the interceptor signals peeled away, fooled by the false jump signature. For now, they were ghosts in metal. As the ship coasted forward again under minimal power, Kale kept his focus split between the navigation chart and the corner of his vision where Naira sat. Her armor was scorched, her face streaked with dried blood and ash, and yet her eyes, those strange, luminous amber eyes, remained sharp. The nebula thinned into clearer space, and Kale locked course toward a neutral sector, an independent trade post floating like a parasite on the edge of lawless territory. It was unaligned, unaffiliated, and known to look the other way in exchange for credits. Nira adjusted systems silently, working in rhythm beside him. Together they landed in a half-functioning docking bay amid flickering lights and oil-stained platforms. The station reeked of exhaust sweat and broken oaths. They stepped into the chaos of the bazaar, blending with smugglers, mercenaries, and engineers from across the sector. Unfamiliar languages clashed in the air. Traders barked prices over weapons crates. Kyle walked beside Naira, one hand on the rifle beneath his coat. He could feel eyes on them. Their partnership, a human and a Thalkiri, was rare enough to draw attention. A bureaucratic exchange secured them access to a cantina, where quiet deals and silent ambushes were equally common. Kyle scanned the room instinctively, noting clan markings, weapon placements, and one face in particular, a ghost from his past. His former superior from Solari intelligence was there lounging in civilian garb, yet emanating the chill of military discipline. The realization struck like a gut punch. Eyes tracked them. The trap was already in motion. Without a word, Nira leaned closer to him in gesture. Her body pressed into his in calculated proximity. In a second, her posture shifted from soldier to seductress. She projected the illusion of intimacy to mask their growing urgency. She drifted away moments later, feigning instability, weaving through tables until she found a group of Vornax mercenaries with ancestral grudges against Solari command. She stumbled, deliberately knocking over a drink, and turned her head just enough for them to follow her gaze to the woman at the bar. Old wounds flared to life. The room exploded. Weapons unsheathed. Screams erupted. Tables overturned. Kael moved instantly, reaching Nira as chaos took root. Plasma fire shredded the walls behind them as they darted into a narrow maintenance corridor. The echo of boots behind them dissolved into distance. They weaved through tunnels, past flickering panels and flickering danger. Twice, they were forced to flatten themselves against pipes as patrols passed. In one such moment, compressed between steel and flesh, Kael could feel her warmth again, almost like a pulse beating through armor. Time lost meaning. Eventually, they reached the lower docks. Kael located a courier ship, unregistered, lightly armed, and mostly intact. Nira handled the access codes with elegant precision. The hatch opened and they slipped aboard. The ship lifted into the air with surgical grace, no alarms, no sirens, until the weapons system of the station activated. Turrets emerged from recesses, tracking their escape vector. Kael activated countermeasures and rerouted auxiliary power. The ship jinked and twisted, avoiding automated fire with maneuvers no manual ever approved. Pursuit ships launched. Kael took the co-pilot chair, directing energy bursts at their engines with surgical precision, disabling without killing. Each pulse of cannon fire found its mark without lethality. Damage, not death. It wasn't mercy. It was restraint. Nira banked the ship through the last defense vector, eyes trained forward. No words passed between them. None were needed. They moved like mirror images, now predicting each other's reactions, adjusting flight paths instinctively. Coordinates were set for Nixar Prime. The stars opened before them, a river of burning light through the void. Kael did not look back. The courier ship dropped out of hyperspace near the edge of a forgotten sector where debris fields drifted like graveyards and long-dead beacons flickered with ghost signals. It was here, among the ruins of a pre-expansion civilization, that Kael Virex located what Nira Talon had described a derelict Thalkiri healing core buried inside the remnants of a hollowed asteroid. The chamber was old, its architecture smooth and organic walls humming faintly with residual energy that vibrated along the bones. The ship moored within a narrow docking fissure. Kael exited first rifle, sweeping through the dark. Nira followed slowly, limping heavily. The shuttle's medpack had offered temporary relief, but her wound was worse than expected. Muscle and tissue damage flared up with every step, her skin pale beneath the emerald hue. They moved deeper into the chamber. The interior was shaped not by industry but by biological design. Every surface was curved, every passageway pulsing faintly with a soft blue bioluminescence. It felt less like a room and more like the inside of something once living. The core chamber opened into a dome of silence and gravity-distorting architecture. At its center lay a crystalline pod, ovoid, translucent, and filled with pale amber fluid that shimmered like captured starlight. Nira stepped forward, her expression shifting from war-hardened caution to something closer to reverence. Her fingers brushed the surface of the pod and it responded instantly. Lights flared softly. Vines of organic wiring extended from the walls, linking with the pod in slow, twitching movements. Kael approached, taking in the foreign tech. He'd seen captured Thalkiri med units in the field, but nothing like this. This was older, more primal. Nira's body trembled slightly as the pod opened. Inside, restraints adjusted for her physiology. The interface was not mechanical, it was tactile, sensory. This wasn't a machine. It was a symbiotic organism built for communion. She braced herself, eyes flashing with residual fear. The fluid in the pod began to thrum. She hesitated. Then the pain in her leg gave a violent spasm and her strength faltered. Kael caught her before she collapsed entirely. Her weight was light, but the heat radiating from her skin was climbing fast, dangerously so. The system was scanning her biology. He understood too late what it required. Thalkiri physiology was network-based, dependent on proximity and resonance. It couldn't heal alone. It needed a pair, a second presence, a mind to stabilize hers. Kale hesitated only a moment. He stepped into the pod beside her. The restraints curled around both of them. The fluids surged up to their necks. A pulse of heat slammed into his spine as the pod sealed with a faint chime of finality. His breath caught. For a moment, all went dark. Then everything ignited. The connection hit like lightning on wet steel. Kyle felt his consciousness dislocate, no pain, just displacement. His memories unraveled like film reels. Boot camp, the massacre at Calden Ridge, the smell of his grandfather's cabin in the mountains of Terra Nova. Each detail flashed not just in his mind, but hers. And then hers. Images not his own. Naira training blindfolded with plasma daggers as a child. Naira watching her sister fall in battle. Naira kneeling at the grave mounds of her clan, red dirt clinging to her knees. And deeper, stranger things, memories stored in her ancestral bloodline. The scent of starvine forests, the feeling of weightless combat above a triple moon sea, the gut pull of duty older than language. Their minds met in the fluid medium like fire and storm clouds. There were no words, just presence, just pulse and perception. Their neurons synced. Their endocrine systems pulsed in mirrored rhythm. Their injuries blurred his bruised ribs, her torn leg equalized by the ancient pod. Their breath became mutual. Their thoughts looped and echoed. It was more than healing. It was fusion. His human DNA, adaptive and opportunistic, reached for hers like ivy toward light. Hers, complex, layered with encoded history, resisted then embraced. The pod adjusted. Chemical bonding initiated. Mitochondrial threads shimmered in sync, and suddenly the system reclassified them not as individuals, but as one biological entity. Kale's heart raced, not with fear, with awe. Something had been born in the space between them, something fragile and luminous. An embryonic signal pulsed within Nira's abdominal cavity, undetected by her but not by the system. The pod's internal readouts glowed brighter, then shifted, categorizing new life. A hybrid cell cluster. Genetic material from both Kale and Naira, already forming a zygotic resonance. A child. The pod confirmed it silently through pulses and temperature. Viable. Stable. An impossible synthesis between two species previously thought incompatible. The Solari and Thalkiri joined not in treaty, but in blood. Kale did not panic. He simply knew. Because now her thoughts were his thoughts. Her surprise, her fear, her stunned awe, they poured into him through the psychic interface. The pod pulsed again. The healing cycle completed. The fluid drained. The restraints loosened. They fell forward into each other, soaked, trembling. Not from exhaustion, but from the aftershock of transformation. Their bond was no longer theoretical. It was physical, hormonal, sensory. They would never again be entirely apart. The pod's memory matrix flickered, leaving behind a faint burn on Kale's skin in the shape of an orbital sigil, an ancient Thalkiri mark that meant bound through fire. As Naira reached for the edge of the chamber to rise, Kale moved beside her, steadying her. No words passed. None were needed. Their eyes met his deep gray, hers burning amber, and the silence between them thrummed with clarity. They were no longer enemies, no longer strangers. They were now something far more complicated, far more dangerous, and far more necessary to the future of two civilizations that had spent decades trying to destroy each other. Kale glanced back at the pod, now inert and dark. Whatever ancient species had built this system had not intended it for war. They had built it for salvation. The courier ship awaited, silent and unaware that its passengers were no longer who they had been when they entered. As they stepped aboard, systems chirped awake. Power flickered across displays. Nira moved to the pilot's seat without a word. Kale sat beside her, their hands brushing as they reached for controls simultaneously. They didn't need to speak. Every breath now echoed in two minds, and somewhere inside her something new stirred. A spark, a life, a bridge. The courier ship departed the hollow asteroid with a whisper, its stealth systems re-engaging as it slipped back into the void. Outside, space returned to its usual quiet indifference. Inside, everything had changed. Kale Virex no longer sat beside a stranger. The woman at the helm was now a permanent presence beneath his skin, like a second heartbeat layered faintly over his own. Nira Talon moved with the same calm determination, but Kyle could feel every shift in her focus, as if it echoed through his muscles. Even when neither of them moved, there was a current of awareness threading between them. Thoughts brushed past one another like silk on metal. They flew in tandem, not just physically, but neurologically. Their shared consciousness fluctuated in intensity, never overwhelming, but ever present. When Nira flared with irritation at a minor navigation error, Kael's hand corrected it before she could speak. When he tensed at an incoming proximity alert, she was already adjusting thrust vectors to compensate. Their bond had evolved beyond tactical coordination. It was something deeper, something biological. As the hours stretched into the blackness of space, the ship became an extension of their synchronized will. Every system responded faster, more intuitively, as if understanding the Gestalt presence within its walls. Then came the tremor. It was not mechanical, it was internal. Nira gasped softly, then stilled. Kael felt it before she reacted. A pulse that wasn't hers, nor his. A fluttering vibration across the biological link. He didn't understand it immediately, but her sudden silence told him she did. The pod's aftermath had left something behind. The ship's biometric scan confirmed it quietly on the third pass, an anomalous energy field centered in Nira's lower abdomen, too structured to be anything but fetal. The scan classified it in neutral terms, viable hybrid stable, but no system could name what it truly was, a convergence. The child, though, barely begun already exerted influence across the link. It wasn't thought not yet, but it was presence, and it rippled outward in soft waves of instinct coloring Kael's awareness, with unfamiliar shades of empathy, protectiveness, and a deep echoing calm. They didn't speak of it, not yet. Instead, they turned their focus outward toward what came next. Pursuit found them again near the edge of Drari space. A Vornax hunter squadron deployed from a deep patrol station cut across their route, alert and aggressive. The stealth systems faltered under prolonged strain. An energy leak from the pod chamber had degraded power distribution. Kael and Nira didn't hesitate. The first attack came in a sharp vector arc, plasma shots lancing toward the aft. Nira rolled the ship violently, a corkscrew dive through a narrow corridor of meteor fragments. Kael rerouted shield harmonics without looking, his body responding to her instincts before his brain gave the command. Weapon systems lit up. Kael triggered them in precise bursts, striking at sensor nodes and engine ports. They weren't trying to kill, not yet. But each shot was clinical efficient. The Vornax ships reeled as their targeting systems failed. A new wave came in tighter formation. Nira's hands hovered over the controls like a musician at a forgotten instrument. She maneuvered the vessel through angles that should have been impossible, exploiting microfluctuations in the gravitational pull of passing debris. Kael operated the pulse array like a surgeon shearing a pursuing craft's rudder fin, cleanly sending it spinning harmlessly into dark space. Each evasion, each counterattack flowed like choreography. They weren't just linked, they were unified. The third Vornax ship launched a grappling beam, a rare tactic aggressive and invasive. It caught the edge of the hull, yanking the courier ship into a spiraling path. Alarms flared. Structural strain climbed fast. Instead of panicking, Nira closed her eyes. Kael did the same. Their minds synchronized fully for one suspended moment. The ship responded. Not to manual input, not to code, but to shared intent. The auxiliary thrusters engaged in reverse sequence, spinning the ship on its axis. Kael rerouted power to the dorsal stabilizers, while Nira bled energy from the shielding grid into the rear thrusters. The ship jerked violently and tore free. They left behind 3 disabled Vornax ships drifting silently. The adrenaline rush faded slowly. Kael sat back, breath ragged, feeling the edge of exhaustion bite. He glanced at Nira. She was pale, her lips slightly parted, skin damp with exertion. But her eyes remained focused, still blazing, still fierce. The moment hung between them. Neither of them smiled. But both understood. The bond was no longer just useful. It was indispensable. They angled the courier ship toward Nixar Prime. The capital world of the Thalkiri emerged like a myth from the blue-black void. Rings of pale green ice circled the planet, reflecting the light of a red giant sun. The surface shimmered in hues. Kael had no name for coppery oceans, teal continents, cities shaped like blossoms carved from glass and stone. They approached with caution, scanning for escort. Thalkiri patrols intercepted them within minutes. Sleek ships with sloping silhouettes and reflective armor that seemed to vanish into background space. Weapons remained cold, but targeting scanners swept them thoroughly. Nira transmitted an ancient recognition code from her clan. The system paused, then cleared them. As they descended into the atmosphere, Kael saw how different this world was. Nothing like the grid and girders sprawl of Solari architecture. Everything here flowed roads, followed the curvature of rivers' towers, spiraled into the clouds like growing vines. The ship settled on a terrace landing pad near what Kyle could only assume was a government compound, domes and spires, coalescing like woven coral. He stood as the hatch opened. The air outside smelled strange, moist, and mineral-rich, tinged with something that reminded him of petrichor and salt. They stepped out together. Thalkiri guards awaited tall, pale green warriors with ceremonial markings. Their expressions were unreadable, but none moved to raise weapons. Their deference to Nira was immediate, not as a soldier, but as a member of something older, deeper, perhaps sacred. She led him through the complex without speaking. Kyle followed, aware of every stare on him. Whispers passed like static. The first human in Thalkiri territory. The traitor. Or the proof. At the heart of the compound, they reached a chamber of circular design. Light streamed in through crystalline ceiling slits. At the far end, a raised dais held a council of elders, 7 Thalkiri aged and marked with bioluminescent lines etched into their skin. Each bore the posture of one who had witnessed too many centuries of war. Nira stepped forward. Kale remained still. The weight of the moment settled across his shoulders like gravity shifting. The silence pressed in. No words were spoken, but the air hummed with decision. The atmosphere within the council chamber crackled with tension, not from sound or movement, but from the sheer density of awareness. The 7 Thalkiri elders sat in silent evaluation, their glowing skin marked with the signs of advanced age and burden. Their eyes, all different shades of luminous gold, stared not at Nira Talon, their kin, but at Kale Virex. He stood beneath their gaze without flinching. Behind his ribs, his heart thundered, but his posture remained calm. Within him, the link still pulsed a subtle thrum where his thoughts and Nira's aligned a neural rhythm, steadying his breath. This was not a trial in name, but it felt like one. Kale felt Nira's mind press gently into his, a silent encouragement and a warning. Here, words would matter less than presence. Conviction would mean more than rhetoric. She stepped forward. The data crystal was presented. The chamber dimmed. A holographic bloom ignited above the center dais, casting rotating images, intercepted transmissions, intercepted Vornak's tactical planning, and recorded conversations from high command. The truth revealed itself not as a declaration, but as an unfolding. The war had been orchestrated, the Helion cataclysm. The spark that had drawn the Solari conquered into war had not been a Thalkiri attack. It had been a manufactured tragedy designed, triggered, and covered by Vornak's operatives posing as Thalkiri dissidents. Likewise, the massacre of a Thalkiri scientific outpost on Vega had been staged to escalate retaliation. Evidence piled into the room like stone slabs on a grave. The elders remained silent as they absorbed it. Kale watched their expressions shift, skepticism crumbling into disbelief, disbelief melting into grief, grief solidifying into something sharper. Not rage, resolution. This then was the power of truth, not a spark but a slow-consuming fire. When the lights returned, no one looked at the data crystal. They looked at him, the alien, the Solari defector, the man who had crossed lines no one had dared. The silence was finally broken. Kale did not speak. He didn't need to. The truth had already been laid bare. But in that silence, he made a choice. He stepped forward, not pleading, not apologizing. He placed himself in the open where no weapons had been drawn, and offered no defense except his willingness to stand. A signal passed through the council, one too quick for outsiders to detect. A gesture, a breath pattern, ancient codes still honored. The decision was made. He would not be imprisoned. He would not be executed. He would be heard. As the chamber recessed and guards relaxed their stances, Nira led him to a smaller hall within the compound. The tension in her shoulders had not eased, but something in her aura had steadied. Kale felt the reverberation of her relief through their shared bond. The next steps formed quickly. The data crystal would be duplicated and shared through secure channels. Envoys would be dispatched to neutral territories with orders to seek out disillusioned Solari factions, those who already doubted Vornak's narratives, those who might listen. But there was more. The Vornaks, once aware their deception had been exposed, would retaliate. Not with diplomacy, but with devastation. Strike plans embedded in the crystal showed coordinates for twin attacks on Nixar Prime and Solari Core Command. 3 days. Massive deployment. New weapons. The council responded not with panic, but precision. A mission was authorized. A stealth vessel would be launched immediately heading toward Dominion Core deep inside Vornax-controlled space. The target hard-proof, specific encrypted records, command codes, deployment rosters, tactical logs. The operatives chosen Nira Talon and Kale Virex, not by debate, by necessity. No one else shared their link. No one else could infiltrate together with minds synchronized and reflexes unified. Preparations moved rapidly. Engineers brought out an obsidian-hulled vessel, its curves designed to vanish against the black of space. It was small, barely large enough for two, but built for evasion speed and adaptability. Inside, Kale and Nira reviewed the infiltration protocols. Their Thalkiri appearances would suffice for her, but not for him. A Vornax identity chip had been forged, his biosignature masked beneath layers of encryption. To the scanners, he would read as a Vornax military contractor, Commander Vexinar. She, his administrative advisor. Kale examined the identity implant, its ridged form warm against his skin as it embedded. It itched against the resonance mark left by the healing pod, his real identity now hidden beneath layers of fiction. The launch occurred in silence. There was no ceremony, no blessing. Just a pair of bonded fugitives propelled into the enemy's heart, armed with ghosts and truth. The trip took 3 days. 3 days inside a silent shadow where sound was dulled and breath was shared. 3 days of meals taken without appetite. 3 days of training simulations reviewed again and again until their movements were indistinguishable from each other. At times, they sat without speaking for hours. At others, they exchanged thoughts so layered in memory that words would have only cheapened the intimacy. His childhood under Solari sky, her first victory in orbit around Kier, the soft hum of her ancestral songs, the weight of his metals long ago discarded. On the final night before arrival, as the ship adjusted for gravitational realignment, Nira lost her footing and fell into him. Their bodies collided, and for one suspended breath, neither pulled away. Kale steadied her with one hand. His other brushed a strand of her hair away from her face. Her skin still radiated that strange Thalkiri warmth. Something passed between them, not emotion, not thought, but certainty. They would go into fire together, and if they died, it would be as one. Dominion Core came into view on the third morning. A monolithic structure orbiting a starless black hole. Dominion Core hung suspended in shadow. Its edges shimmered with active gravity dampeners, and its docking rings glowed faintly with green pulses. No decoration, no banners, just function and fear. Their credentials passed the outer scan. No alarms triggered. No weapons tracked them. Inside the docking bay, no one looked twice at their borrowed uniforms. They were just another Vornax duo among hundreds. Another anonymous pair. The game had begun. They stepped off the ship and into the lion's mouth. The corridors of Dominion Core pulsed with cold precision. Every surface was utilitarian, matte black, unreflective. Security nodes tracked subtle energy signatures. Drones drifted through the air like mechanical insects, reading ID tags and scanning for behavioral anomalies. No warmth, no decoration, just movement surveillance order. Kale Virex moved with measured steps beside Nira Talon. Their uniforms bore the insignia of Vornax military support staff, unremarkable subordinate. Kale's implant masked his physiology, emitting the biometrics of a Vornax contractor. He felt the sensor pulses pass through him every few meters. Each one tugged at his spine like a whisper trying to tear open a secret. They passed checkpoint after checkpoint, Nira's posture subtly submissive, hers the role of a quiet assistant. Her eyes never met the guards. Her gait matched the rigid etiquette of Vornax protocol. Kyle took the lead as planned, projecting indifference with every step. The central data core lay beyond a fortified wing of command terminals, accessible only with Tier 3 clearance. Their forged passes held barely. The final guard squinted at Kale's credentials, hesitating. He considered the clearance code the name of the fictional admiral who had authorized their presence. But Protocol won. The guard waved them through. Inside the data core chamber, the temperature dropped noticeably. The main console towered in the center, glowing with shifting geometric glyphs. Nira moved immediately to the interface, her fingers dancing over the symbols with inherited ease. The system responded, partly organic, partly synthetic, a fusion of the ancient Vornax neural mesh and adaptive architecture. Kale stood guard at the door, his senses expanded by the bond. Through Nira, he felt the pulse of the network as if it breathed. Her awareness opened like a lens, and he glimpsed fragments of the data before it rendered. Timelines, deployment strategies, energy signatures. Then the critical fragment, 2 synchronized attack plans. Nixar Prime and the Solari homeworld, 3 days. Orbital bombardment with newly developed nanoplasma warheads capable of liquefying planetary crusts within hours. Shock doctrine, no warning, no demands. The data crystal filled with evidence. Kyle could feel Nira's breathing shift. The pod within her abdomen, their child, fluttered faintly. The resonance of their hybrid offspring seemed to react to the data, heightening their awareness, sharpening their instincts. The bond had deepened again. But the alarm struck before the final file downloaded. A cold, vibrating siren. Crimson emergency glyphs flared in the air. Somewhere in the fortress, another team had triggered a trace, likely an anomaly in their clearance trail. They were no longer unnoticed. Kyle and Nira moved in unison, abandoning stealth. They shot through the corridor, sidestepping startled staff. Vornak's security forces emerged like wasps from hidden compartments. Plasma rifles hummed. Kale fired first non-lethal rounds aimed at Joint's visor's optics. Nira struck faster, sliding beneath shots, disarming 2 soldiers with bladed precision, then launching their bodies into others with augmented strength. Every motion was rehearsed, but the numbers mounted. They could not hold. Pinned behind a blast shield, they shared a look, no panic, just calculation. Then the decision. Kale would create a diversion. Nira would escape with the crystal. She refused. Their bond shuddered with conflict. Kale moved anyway. He threw himself into open fire, drawing attention, yelling wordless challenges as he vanished down a side corridor. Security teams surged after him. His body burned with adrenaline and exhaustion. He didn't think. He only moved. Every second he bought was another second for Nira. She took it. Finding the secondary dock in chaos, she activated their stealth vessel remotely, drawing it to a ruptured airlock. Emergency bulkheads protested but complied. The moment the hatch opened, she sprinted barefoot, now armor-shredded face bloodied. The data crystal pulsed against her chest. Kale appeared at the edge of the dock, a dozen Vornak soldiers behind him. He didn't slow. He leapt. The vacuum caught him for a heartbeat. Then her hand caught his wrist. She pulled him through. The hatch sealed. She collapsed into the pilot's seat, fingers bloody but certain. Kale strapped in beside her. His chest heaved, his arm trembled, but he was alive. The data was safe. Dominion Corps' defense grid ignited. Turrets spat lines of fire into the void. Nira didn't flinch. She engaged evasive systems and poured all remaining power into propulsion. Kale manned the rear weapons, targeting missiles and drones with deadly calm. He aimed only to disable enough to cripple, not kill. The vessel trembled with the effort. For 3 days they ran, through asteroid fields and dead zones, through ghost relays and collapsed jump gates. Kale barely slept. Nira barely spoke. The child inside her now pulsed in both of them, its presence growing stronger, more curious. In moments of stillness, Kale felt flickers of emotion that weren't his. Curiosity, peace, trust. At the edge of Nixar's defensive perimeter, they encountered a final Vornax cruiser, larger than anything they'd faced. Too fast to outrun, too powerful to fight. They fled into an asteroid fissure, gambling on shadows. Inside, they shut down all power, life support on minimum, weapons cold, no signals. And they waited, for 18 hours, huddled together in silence. Their bodies pressed for warmth. The child curled inside Nira gave off faint pulses of awareness. The bond held them in stillness, deeper than words. Finally, the cruiser departed. When they emerged, they were ghosts again. Back on Nixar Prime, their return was met with alarm and disbelief, then celebration. The data crystal revealed everything. The coordinated strike, the falsified attacks, the centuries-long manipulation by the Vornax High Command. Within days, the Solari conquered and Thalkiri Senate initiated backdoor communication. Within weeks, a ceasefire was signed, and for the first time in 40 years, peace returned to the stars. Kale was named an ambassador, Nira a warden of the Accord. But titles meant little compared to the child born 3 months later. They named him Kyrian, a name from both languages meaning bridge. His skin shimmered with tones of jade and copper. His eyes bore Solari blue rimmed with Thalkiri gold. His presence was calm, watching deeply aware long before speech. He was the first true hybrid, and he was proof that union was not only possible, it was necessary. On the first anniversary of the ceasefire, Kyle stood beside Nira on the balcony of their home, overlooking the quiet sea of Nixar. Above them, the 3 moons shimmered like pearls. Behind them, their sun slept. Ahead of them, the stars waited, not as enemies, but as a shared horizon. Across scorched battlefields and into the heart of enemy space, Kael Virex and Neratalon defied the doctrines of their people, risking everything not for victory, but for truth. In the shadows of betrayal, they found a connection no war could sever. Through a bond forged in fire, they became more than soldier and alien. They became a unified force not just of tactics, but of heart instinct and legacy. Together, they uncovered the manufactured war that had claimed millions. Together, they brought down an empire of lies. And in the stillness after the storm, they gave rise to something new, a child of two worlds, a living symbol of what could be built when understanding triumphed over fear. In the galaxy's darkest hour, two enemies chose to trust. And in doing so, they changed the course of history. If this story moved you, inspired you, or simply ignited your imagination, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We post long-form HFY sci-fi every week, diving deep into tales of unity sacrifice and the strange beauty of life beyond the stars. Comment below. What part hit you the hardest? What would you risk for peace? Until next time, travelers, stay curious, stay brave, and keep reaching for the stars.